Hey guys, what's up? Right here, I have almost every piece that I need to build my brand new dedicated streaming PC. Now, if you've been here for a little bit, you've probably heard that sentence a couple times. Because I replaced my dedicated streaming PC for my dual PC Twitch streaming setup very often. New stuff comes out. I just like making new computers. Those are all the excuses I have for me to get a bunch of random and weird parts and put them together to make a pretty sick PC. I'm gonna use most of these parts to build an insane ITX dedicated streaming PC. But I'm not only going to be putting a full capture card in this motherboard, I'm also going to be putting a full-size dual slot graphics card in the same board. Stay tuned for how I'm going to do that in today's video. Hey guys, what's up? Before we get into this build, I just want to say that we have a sponsor for today's video. This build is sponsored by Asetek. Asetek is a leading manufacturer of AIO liquid coolers in both the consumer and server space. They make many of my builds possible, and they make some of the most unique and awesome liquid cooling products, such as my personal favorites, the 690LX and the 645LT. They also make a ton of other mainstream liquid coolers, such as the EVGA CLC 360 that I used to use in my personal build. Check them out, as well as a bunch of other coolers they make that I love, in the description below. But besides that, let's get into the video, and thank you Asetek for sponsoring this build. First things first, let's talk about the platform for today's video and the parts that we're going to be using. So for our motherboard today, we have, as we saw before, the X299E ITX from ASRock. This is a one-of-a-kind X299 motherboard from ASRock, and I freaking love it. This board, not only is this a socket LGA 2066 motherboard in the ITX form factor, but it actually manages to have quad channel memory. Yes, it has 4 SODIMM slots. Quick rundown, it also has 2 M.2 slots on the back and a SODIMM.2, which is pretty sick. This is a M.2 slot with a SODIMM form factor for the bottom, which actually goes into this little extra SODIMM slot over here. Also have a bunch of other cool features, you know, it's got Wi-Fi and all that stuff, and a actually decent amount of I/O for a board this small, which we will go over as they become relevant throughout this video. First things first, I want to install my CPU so I don't accidentally stick my finger in the CPU socket like some people accidentally tend to do. Which gives us a great opportunity to talk about the CPU for today's build. This is the Intel Core i7-9800X, an 8-core, 16-thread Intel X series CPU. I've been using this CPU in multiple different dedicated streaming PCs, and it has been amazing. It's one of my most stable overclocking CPUs, and with 8 cores, 16 threads, it is plenty for dedicated streaming, even in up to 4K resolution using the X264 encoder, which is what this build will primarily be using. So I'm just going to do a standard LGA 2066 install. There's really nothing special here. Now that we have that installed, let's install our SODIMM memory. For today's build, we have no less than 64 gigabytes of DDR4 2666 SODIMMs. And this is what we're going to be using in today's build. Do you ever really need more than 16 gigs for something like this? No, but I don't care what I need. I only care what I want. And what I want, crap ton of memory. That is dense. But it could be denser. Alright guys, let's get right into the main event of this build. The capture card that we're going to be using. Yes, in today's build, we're going to be using not these. If anyone's looking to buy one of those, I'm done with them. Shoot me a DM on Discord. We're going to be using this. Yes, this. This is a capture card. This is a 4K capture card, actually. Supports resolutions up to 4096 by 2160. This is the Magewell Eco M.2 4K capture card. And this thing is the sole reason we are able to do an ITX build with a full-size graphics card with a motherboard like this. I also mentioned the 2 M.2 slots on the back of this board. Those will be populated with this is an Intel Optane SSD, and this is a 256GB Kingston M.2 SSD. There's really nothing special about these drives. Their uses are pretty simple. The Kingston SSD has a bunch of assets that I used to use for editing, and I want them back on this PC. The Intel Optane SSD is to speed up our hard drives in the system. This is 4 terabytes of Seagate Barracuda hard drive space. I'm going to be using that to import footage from my camera. I'm also going to use it to record live streams and other types of gameplay using this rig. I also have a 1 terabyte, 2.5 inch hard drive that is also going to serve the same purpose. And finally, for our boot drive, we have our 1 terabyte Inland Professional drive. I do plan on replacing this with a better SSD in the near future. I just haven't gotten it in yet. So we're going to use our current Stream PC drive. This is the drive that has all of the data and information for my live streams. So this is going to be the boot drive in our system. So with a total of 6 drives with an extra M.2 to spare for our capture card, I think we're just about ready to build this PC. But before that, we have something else to talk about. Well, this is going to be the power supply for today's system. And this thing is no less than freaking awesome. This is the FSP Twins Pro 500 watt redundant power supply. I've talked about this unit in a different video, a dedicated video just about this power supply, which you can find a link for in the description. But to sum it up, this unit is stacked, just like these. So if you don't know what the Twins series is from FSP, well, let me enlighten you a little bit. Inside each one of these boxes is a dedicated 520 watt, 80 plus gold PSU. And both of these power supply units slot into this chassis to give us a redundant power supply for the consumer. And again, as usual, I will leave a link to everything, including the Twins Pro series and some other products in the description below, and anything else I use in this build. So basically, it's pretty simple to use this unit. These power supplies slide in and click, just like so. And just like that, we have a redundant 520 watt power supply. Why am I using this power supply for a dedicated streaming PC? Well, 2 reasons. First of all, while I'm streaming, I do not want my stream to go down. Now, there are other bottlenecks, but I want to make absolutely sure hardware failure is not one of them. So a redundant power supply unit will basically mitigate any downtime due to power supply failure or plug failure or anything of the sort, because this thing has 2 different power connectors on it that I can hook up to 2 different plugs. If one of these units fails, the other unit will take over the full load of the system instantly and the system will not turn off. That is freaking awesome. A little bit overkill for this rig, but definitely worth it for me when streaming basically keeps my channel alive. As a side note, I'm also using this rig as a temporary NAS. It's going to be storing a lot of my data and a lot of raw footage that I'll be using for editing, so I don't want it to fail. So to power these hard drives and make sure that nothing is turning off when I am transferring files that I don't want to lose, I want to absolutely make sure I'm using a good power supply. So to avoid any unnecessary downtime or again any hardware failure, because the worst thing is when I'm transferring a file and the system goes down and I lose whatever data I happened to be transferring at the time. So having a unit like this to keep my system alive even when there's some kind of power failure is amazing. And I do want to thank FSP for sending me this unit to use in this build and a server build that I'm going to be doing soon. Stay tuned for that. Alright, I've got 2 more things to talk about before we could do our fun little build montage. What I want to talk about next is the cooler for today's build. This is probably the most unusual CPU liquid cooler that you have ever seen. It's an AIO from ITX. But it's cut in half. But that's no accident. These are quick disconnects. They basically allow me to connect the pump to its radiator at any point that I want to. You'll see why in the build in a minute. This is very important for today's build. I'm going to make this build look super clean as best as I can, so this is definitely necessary to keep a nice and cool system. This cooler was actually sent to me by none other than my good friend Dennis over at ITX. Thank you, Dennis, for sending me this. Thank you, ITX, for actually, sending this over. This thing is freaking awesome. One of a kind, and I'm super excited to use it in today's build. So this is where we'll be keeping our 165 watt TDP 9800X in check. It'll keep it nice and cool because ITX has designed a freaking killer unit here. So yep, this is the cooler for today's build. This is the Thermaltake Tower 100. this is the case we're going to be using in our new build. This thing is a mini ITX version of their very popular Tower 900, and I find this thing freaking adorable and have wanted to use it for a while. I've actually had this sitting around. I bought it from Amazon for like $100. I will leave a link in the description below again, and I thought this build would be perfect for it. Cue the montage. Alright guys, so in the end, we ended up finishing this PC. It took a little bit, but I think it was definitely worth it. Now, I had a small problem with that Magewell capture card in the sense that it straight up just doesn't work. So, I had to replace it with a Aver Media card, and the back of this PC looks absolutely terrible right now. This Asetek cooler is super nice. It's really hard to get a look like this with an AIO, but being able to route the tubes underneath and then just have the radiator at the top is awesome. It keeps my CPU nice and cool. I've actually streamed on this PC a couple times at the time of making this video, and it has stayed cool and very quiet. The loudest part of the system is actually that power supply, but only when the system turns on, because the fans rev up to the max for about a second, and then it's dead quiet. This thing has been great. Our Vega 64 doesn't really do anything except really decode video, but again, it's just nice to have in the system, especially something that's not going to be under load. It's just such a nice little RGB accent to add, and setting it to red to match the Radeon card. Again, I can switch out the card anytime, and I'll probably just switch out the card as I get stuff, maybe Quadro something in the future, I don't know. But that's this point. Hope you guys kind of enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much to Asetek for sponsoring this video, and FSP for sending me the power supply that I used today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.